Imagine sitting under a silent tree. No phone, no noise, no expectations, just you and your breath. Tonight, we explore a powerful idea inspired by the teachings of Gautama Buddha, the power of living alone. Not loneliness, not isolation, but conscious solitude. Because sometimes the greatest discovery you can make is yourself. Long ago, a prince walked away from a palace filled with comfort, luxury, and people. He chose forests instead of crowds, silence instead of celebration, simplicity instead of status. Why? Because he understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You cannot understand life until you learn to sit alone with your own mind. Living alone is not about escaping the world. It is about meeting yourself without distraction. Most people fear being alone because in silence, the mind begins to speak. Thoughts appear, emotions surface, questions arise. Who am I? What am I chasing? Why am I restless even when everything seems fine? These questions are uncomfortable. But according to Buddha's wisdom, discomfort is the doorway to awakening. When you live alone, you begin to see your habits clearly. You notice how often you reach for noise just to avoid silence. You notice how your happiness depends on others' approval. You notice how your mind constantly jumps between past regrets and future worries. Solitude becomes a mirror, and mirrors do not lie. In the beginning, living alone feels heavy. The room feels too quiet. Time feels slow. The mind feels loud. But slowly something changes. Silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling peaceful. You begin to enjoy small things, the sound of breathing, the rhythm of footsteps, the calm of morning light entering the room. This is where inner freedom begins. Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering. When you always need people, validation, or noise around you, your happiness becomes fragile. But when you learn to live alone peacefully, your happiness becomes stable, because now it comes from within. Living alone teaches emotional independence. You learn to handle sadness without distraction. You learn to celebrate small wins quietly. You learn to solve problems without constant reassurance. And slowly, confidence grows, not loud confidence, but calm confidence. The confidence that says, I am enough. In solitude, you also begin to understand the nature of thoughts. Thoughts come go like clouds. Some are dark, some are light, but none stay forever. When you're always surrounded by people, you rarely notice this. But alone, you see the mind clearly. And once you see the mind clearly, it loses its power to control you. This is awareness. Awareness is the beginning of wisdom. The world today is afraid of being alone. Notifications, social media, endless entertainment. Everything is designed to keep you distracted. But distraction is not peace. Distraction is temporary escape. Peace comes from understanding yourself. And understanding yourself requires silence. That is why Buddha spent long periods in meditation, alone under the Bodhi tree. Not to escape the world, but to understand suffering, desire, and the human mind. Living alone gives you that same opportunity, even in a small way. You begin to notice your desires more clearly. The desire to be liked, the desire to succeed quickly, the desire to compare yourself with others. And when you observe desire without reacting, it slowly loses its grip on you. This is freedom. Another gift of living alone is clarity. When you're constantly surrounded by opinions, it becomes difficult to hear your own voice. But in solitude, your true priorities become visible. You begin to ask, what truly matters to me? What kind of life do I want? What brings real peace? These questions shape your future. Solitude is not empty time. It is self-construction time. Just like a seed grows underground in darkness before becoming a tree, a person grows internally in solitude before becoming strong in the world. Buddha's journey shows this clearly. His wisdom was not built in crowds. It was built in silence. Living alone also teaches acceptance. You stop running from your weaknesses. You see them, you understand them, and slowly, you improve them without anger or judgment. Instead of fighting yourself, you start befriending yourself. And that changes everything. Because the person you spend the most time with in life is you. If you cannot live peacefully with yourself, no relationship will ever feel complete. But if you can live happily alone, relationships become choices, not emotional necessities. That is true independence. There is also great creativity in solitude. When the mind is not overloaded with noise, new ideas appear naturally. Solutions become clearer. Imagination becomes stronger. Silence feeds creativity. This is why many thinkers, writers, and spiritual teachers value time alone. In solitude, the mind resets. Just like the body needs sleep, the mind needs silence. Without silence, the mind becomes tired, confused, and reactive. With silence, the mind becomes sharp, calm, and aware. Living alone also changes how you see others. You become less judgmental because you understand your own struggles. You become more compassionate because you see that everyone is dealing with their own thoughts and fears. Solitude does not disconnect you from people. It makes your connection more meaningful. You no longer seek people to fill emptiness. You connect to share completeness. That is love without attachment. But Buddha never said you must live alone forever. The lesson is not isolation, it is self-understanding. Once you understand yourself, you can live anywhere, in a city, in a family, in a busy workplace, and still carry inner peace. Because solitude becomes a state of mind, not a physical place. You can sit in a crowded room and still feel calm inside. That is the power of inner stillness. If you have never spent time alone intentionally, start small. Sit quietly for 10 minutes without your phone. Observe your breathing. Watch your thoughts without judging them. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. That's okay. Growth often begins with discomfort. Slowly, those 10 minutes will become peaceful. And that peace will begin to follow you everywhere. Living alone teaches patience. It teaches acceptance. It teaches awareness. It teaches strength. But most importantly, it teaches you that happiness does not come from outside. It comes from understanding your own mind. This is the wisdom Buddha discovered, and it remains true today. You do not need a forest or a monastery to experience it. You only need silence and willingness. So tonight, instead of running from silence, sit with it. Instead of distracting your mind, observe it. Instead of fearing solitude, learn from it. Because the person you are searching for in the world has been sitting quietly inside you all along. Tonight, we are not going to talk about success. We're not going to talk about money. We're not going to talk about impressing the world. Tonight, we talk about sitting alone and discovering the power hidden in that silence. There is a strange fear many people carry in modern life. Not the fear of failure, not the fear of rejection, but the fear of being alone. The moment the room becomes quiet, the mind becomes loud. And most people spend their lives trying to avoid that moment. They keep the TV on while eating. They scroll before sleeping. They call someone when silence appears. They fill every empty second with noise because silence feels uncomfortable. But what if silence is not the enemy? What if silence is the teacher? Long ago, a seeker sat alone beneath a tree for many days. No audience, no conversation, no entertainment, just observation of breath, mind, and reality. From that deep solitude came understanding. Understanding of suffering, desire, fear, and peace. That understanding still guides millions of people today. And the path began with something very simple: being alone. Living alone is often misunderstood. People think it means loneliness. They think it means sadness. They think it means disconnection. But true solitude is not emptiness. It is space. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to understand. And most importantly, space to become. Imagine your mind as a glass of muddy water. If you keep shaking it all the time, it stays cloudy. But if you place it down and leave it still, the mud slowly settles. Solitude is that stillness. When you stop shaking your life with constant distraction, clarity begins to appear. At first, what you see may not be pleasant. You may notice anxiety you were ignoring. You may notice insecurity hidden under confidence. You may notice how much your happiness depends on others. But this is not a problem. This is awareness. And awareness is the beginning of freedom. When you start living alone, even for short moments, you begin to learn emotional strength. You learn how to sit with sadness without escaping it. You learn how to calm yourself without needing reassurance. You learn how to understand your anger instead of reacting to it. This is real power, not controlling others, not controlling situations, controlling yourself. At first, solitude feels like standing in front of a mirror for too long. You begin to see everything clearly, your habits, your fears, your patterns. You notice how often you seek approval. You notice how quickly you compare yourself with others. You notice how rarely you sit peacefully without doing something. And slowly, these observations begin to change you. Not forcefully, naturally. Because once you see something clearly, you cannot unsee it. There's a quiet confidence that grows in solitude. It does not shout. It does not show off. It does not compete. It simply exists. It is the confidence of knowing you can handle your own thoughts. And that confidence is stronger than any external validation. Modern life trains us to depend on stimulation. Music while traveling, videos while eating, notifications every few minutes, constant conversation. The mind never rests. But just like muscles grow during rest, the mind becomes strong during silence. Without silence, the mind becomes tired and reactive. With silence, the mind becomes calm and sharp. Living alone teaches patience in a way nothing else can. When you are alone, time moves differently. Minutes feel longer, evenings feel deeper, thoughts feel clearer, and in that slower rhythm, you begin to notice life more carefully. The sound of a fan spinning, the feeling of breathing, the warmth of sunlight on your skin. These small things become meaningful again because your attention returns. Another transformation happens in solitude. Your relationship with yourself improves. Most people are kind to others but harsh on themselves. They forgive others easily but judge themselves constantly. But when you spend time alone, you begin to understand yourself. You see why you react certain ways. You see where your fears come from. You see how your past shaped your behavior. And slowly, judgment turns into compassion. You stop fighting yourself. You start supporting yourself. There's also great mental freedom in learning to be alone. If you cannot be alone peacefully, you may stay in wrong places just to avoid loneliness. Wrong friendships, wrong relationships, wrong environments. But when solitude becomes comfortable, you gain the power to choose wisely. You no longer stay where your peace is disturbed. You no longer tolerate what harms your mind, because you know you're okay on your own. That is independence. Solitude also strengthens decision-making. When too many voices surround you, your inner voice becomes weak. Everyone has advice. Everyone has opinions. Everyone has expectations. But in silence, your own clarity grows. You begin to trust yourself. And self-trust is one of the strongest foundations of a peaceful life. There is a story about a person who feared being alone in his home. Every night, he played loud music so he would not hear silence. One day, the electricity went out. For the first time, he sat quietly in darkness. At first, fear appeared, then restlessness, then memories, then emotions. But after some time, calmness. He later realized the silence was never frightening. He was just unfamiliar with himself. Living alone teaches acceptance. You accept your past mistakes. You accept your imperfections. You accept that not everything is under your control. And strangely, acceptance brings peace faster than resistance ever could. Because fighting reality creates suffering. Understanding reality creates wisdom. Creativity also grows in solitude. When the mind is not constantly consuming information, it begins to produce ideas. You think deeper. You imagine more freely. You solve problems calmly. Silence becomes a creative partner. This is why many writers, philosophers, and spiritual seekers valued being alone. In silence, the mind organizes itself. Solitude also changes how you see relationships. You stop expecting others to complete you. Instead, you begin to share life with them. Love becomes lighter. Friendship becomes more genuine. Conversations become more meaningful because you're no longer afraid of being alone. You are choosing connection, not depending on it. There is a powerful difference between escaping the world and understanding it. Escaping is running away from problems. Solitude is observing them calmly. When you observe your mind long enough, you begin to see patterns. How desire creates stress. How expectations create disappointment. How comparison creates insecurity. And once you see these patterns clearly, they lose their control over you. This is inner freedom. Imagine sitting quietly every day for just a few minutes. No phone, no conversation, no distraction, just breathing and observing. At first, your mind will resist. It will create excuses. It will demand stimulation. It will feel bored. But boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the doorway to awareness. On the other side of boredom is calmness. Living alone teaches resilience. When challenges come, you do not panic. You pause. You breathe. You think clearly because you're used to being with your thoughts. You're not afraid of them anymore. And that makes you emotionally strong. Eventually, solitude stops feeling like something you have to do. It becomes something you value, like sleep, like fresh air, like peace. You begin to protect your quiet time because you understand its importance. And then one day, you realize something beautiful. Being alone no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like home, not a physical home, an inner home, a place where your mind can rest without pretending, performing, or proving anything. A place where you are simply yourself. The world will always be noisy. Responsibilities will exist. People will come and go. Life will remain unpredictable. But if you learn the art of living alone peacefully, you carry silence within you. And that silence becomes strength. That silence becomes clarity. That silence becomes freedom. So tonight, do not fear being alone. Sit quietly, listen to your breath, watch your thoughts, and slowly, gently, patiently meet yourself. Because sometimes the greatest journey you will ever take is the journey inward. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a quiet forest at dawn. The air is cool. The world is silent. No notifications. No conversations. No expectations. Just the sound of your own breathing. In that silence, there is power. Today, we're going to explore something most people fear, avoid, or misunderstand. The power of living alone, inspired by the timeless wisdom of Gautama Buddha. This is not about loneliness. This is not about running away from society. This is about discovering the strength, clarity, and peace that can only be found when you are alone with yourself. More than 2,500 years ago, a young prince named Siddhartha walked away from his palace. That prince later became known as. He had everything: luxury, comfort, family, status. Yet he chose solitude. Why would someone who had everything leave everything? Because he understood a truth that many of us still struggle to accept. You can have the world and still not know yourself. And without knowing yourself, no achievement will ever feel complete. In today's world, being alone feels uncomfortable. The moment we are alone, we reach for our phones. We play music. We scroll endlessly. We text someone. We distract ourselves. Why? Because silence forces us to meet our thoughts. And our thoughts are not always peaceful. When you sit alone, your mind begins to speak. It reminds you of mistakes. It replays old conversations. It creates imaginary fears. It compares your life with others. And this is exactly why solitude is powerful. Because when you are alone, the truth appears. According to the teachings of suffering comes from attachment, attachment to people, outcomes, expectations, identity. When you constantly depend on others for validation, your happiness becomes fragile. If someone praises you, you feel good. If someone criticizes you, you feel broken. But when you learn to live alone peacefully, something changes. Your happiness stops depending on others. It becomes stable. It becomes internal. Living alone teaches you emotional independence. At first, it feels uncomfortable. The room feels too quiet. The evenings feel too long. Your thoughts feel too loud. But slowly, you begin to observe instead of react. Instead of escaping sadness, you sit with it. Instead of blaming someone for your frustration, you examine it. Instead of needing constant reassurance, you build self-trust. And in that process, you become stronger. Not aggressive strong, not ego strong, calm strong. The kind of strength that does not need to prove itself. Solitude is like a mirror. When you're surrounded by people, distractions blur your reflection. But when you are alone, the mirror becomes clear. You see your habits. You see your fears. You see your insecurities. You see your desires. And at first, that reflection may not be comfortable. But growth does not begin in comfort. It begins in awareness. Spent years in meditation, sitting alone under the Bodhi tree. Not because he hated the world, but because he wanted to understand it deeply. And the only way to understand the world is to first understand your own mind. When you live alone, you begin to notice how restless your mind truly is. You realize that even when you are sitting still, your thoughts are running. Past, future, regret, fear, comparison. Your mind rarely stays in the present. But solitude gives you the opportunity to watch these thoughts without getting trapped in them. And once you watch them calmly, something magical happens. You realize they are just thoughts. They are not you. They come. They stay for a moment. They leave, just like clouds in the sky. This realization is freedom. Another powerful lesson of living alone is clarity. When you are constantly surrounded by opinions, expectations, and noise, your own voice becomes weak. You start living according to what others think is right. But in solitude, your real priorities surface. You begin to ask, what truly makes me peaceful? What kind of person do I want to become? Am I chasing success, or am I chasing approval? These questions shape your life, and you cannot hear them clearly in noise, only in silence. Living alone also teaches you the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is when you feel incomplete without others. Solitude is when you feel complete within yourself. Loneliness feels heavy. Solitude feels empowering. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you stop entering relationships out of fear. You choose people because you want to share your peace, not because you need someone to fill emptiness. That is real maturity. That is real strength. In modern society, we are constantly connected, yet internally disconnected. We talk all day, but rarely listen to ourselves. We chase success, but rarely question why. Solitude becomes revolutionary. It is a quiet rebellion against distraction. It is a return to yourself. When you live alone, even for short periods, you begin to enjoy simple things. A cup of tea in silence, the sound of rain, morning sunlight entering the room, the rhythm of your breathing. These small experiences become meaningful because your mind is not overloaded. Silence sharpens awareness, and awareness deepens gratitude. There's also immense creativity in solitude. When your mind is not constantly consuming information, it begins to create. Ideas appear naturally. Solutions become clearer. Your imagination expands. Many great thinkers value time alone because they understood this. Silence is not empty. It is full of answers. Living alone teaches responsibility. You cannot blame others for your mood. You cannot hide behind social noise. You cannot escape yourself. You must face yourself. And that is powerful, because once you learn to manage your own emotions alone, no external situation can easily disturb you. You become centered, like a tree with deep roots. Storms may come, but you remain steady. But remember, the message is not to isolate yourself from society forever. Eventually return to society to share his wisdom. The purpose of solitude is not escape. It is preparation. Preparation to live in the world without losing yourself. Preparation to love without attachment. Preparation to work without stress controlling you. Preparation to exist peacefully anywhere. If you fear living alone, start small. Sit without your phone for 15 minutes. Walk alone without music. Eat a meal without watching something. Observe how your mind reacts. Do not judge it. Just observe. That observation is the beginning of transformation. The more comfortable you become with yourself, the less you will seek constant external stimulation. You will stop chasing validation. You will stop over-explaining yourself. You will stop trying to impress everyone, because you will understand something deeply. You're already enough. And when you feel enough within, the world stops feeling like a competition. It becomes an experience. Living alone is not about being physically separated. It is about being mentally free. Free from dependency. Free from constant comparison. Free from fear of silence. When you master solitude, you master yourself. And when you master yourself, the world loses its power to control your happiness. So the next time you find yourself alone, do not rush to fill the silence. Sit with it. Breathe. Listen. Because in that silence, your real self is waiting. And perhaps, just like the young prince who became, you will discover that the greatest palace is not made of gold. It is the peaceful mind you build within. Thank you for listening and watching. Please subscribe to the channel.